Our final speaker is also going to talk from the caregiver's point of view. It's Phil Frampton. Over to you, Phil.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present my side of the life as a primary caregiver to a neuropathic pain patient. In my case, the path from a normal human being, the patient in this case, to a neuropathic pain patient took about 6 years to diagnosis. For some people, this time frame can be a lot shorter. It can take about a split second. 7 years ago, my wife, Janice, was diagnosed with a rare genetic neurological birth defect called tethered spinal cord syndrome. For the first 46 years of her life, she had lived with misdiagnosed, untreated neuropathic pain, eventually using alcohol to cope with her pain. Her story is one many of you may have heard or read, or at least know about. What you don't know is that I was her primary, no, her sole caregiver on the heartbreaking journey to that diagnosis. As Janice will tell you herself, without me and without the support of our 4 daughters, she would not be alive today to share her story with you. For those of you in the audience who are or have been caregivers, like Catherine, you know what a difficult road it is we walk and how little support exists within our current system of healthcare. I would like to ask the audience, how many of you out there are caregivers to a spouse, son, or daughter? Is there any? There's a lot of you out there? Not too sure how many we have here right now. Those of you who did, and as Catherine says, did any of you ever receive any training or attend Caregiving 101? Did you ever read Caregiving for Dummies? I have not had the pleasure of any of these, even if they do exist. But what I can tell you is there is no theory that can adequately prepare you for the reality. No 2 days are ever the same. My first experience of the problems my wife was encountering came when we were walking down Oxford Street in London in the summer of 1998. She tripped on an uneven paving stone. She said, "That was weird. It felt like I was dragging my right leg." Strange muscle spasm? Who knows? No time for diagnosis. We were on a roll. We were in London. When Janice had an emotional breakdown and walked out of her flight attendant training class in February of 2001, I held a job as a high-powered sales executive with a large computer software company in downtown Toronto. Of course, we didn't know at the time she had an underlying physical condition and neuropathic pain at the same time. 10 years ago, my life changed forever when I lost my job because of the circumstances surrounding her illness. After losing my job, I realized I had no option, but taking care of my wife was going to be my full-time job for the next while. Unfortunately, this was a position I was ill-equipped to handle at the time. Being a caregiver means more than just changing sheets, wiping someone's bottom, or changing their diapers, as in my case. We are the advocates, the chauffeurs, the nursemaids, the fathers and mothers, the psychologists and friends. We are the backbone of the system when the system fails the chronically ill. Yet no one acknowledges us when we fall down. So after 20 years of marriage, I knew it was not in Janice's nature to abandon her job. Our 4 children and the marriage she loved for alcohol, and I knew I had to find out why. Eventually, Jan got her diagnosis, and following her surgeries, of which there were 5 spinal surgeries, she started to put her life back together. For her, the diagnosis itself was the answer she had been waiting for her whole life, ever since she was 3 months old and had an interception of the bowel that everyone thought was a stomach problem, but actually it was all related. And despite having ongoing neuropathic pain, she felt a sense of validation. But I had lost mine, as I felt I was no longer needed as a caregiver. Losing my sense of self when I was no longer needed as a caregiver was just as impactful as losing my sense of self when I became a caregiver. It is never a burden to care for someone you love, but the burden of care should not be borne solely by the caregiver. And as caregivers, we should not feel stigmatized by society. If not for thousands of men, women, and adult children like myself, who see no other option but to stay home and take care of our loved ones, our provincial healthcare system would be overrun with requests for assistance. Or worse still, there'd be more deaths from neglect. Being a caregiver is very underrated. As a spousal caregiver, we are unable to leave the situation at the end of the day, and we often neglect ourselves in order to care for our loved ones, getting sick ourselves in the process. I know in most cases, and probably like Catherine, at the end of the day you fall into bed totally physically and mentally exhausted, and then have to get up and start all over again. Our children are neglected. Our daughters couldn't understand how their mum, who used to jump out of bed in the morning, run the household, drive them and their friends everywhere, make dinner, and then fly off to work, had deteriorated to this point. Our careers as caregivers are neglected, and we are put behind in the workforce. We become increasingly isolated from family and friends as our self-esteem and self-confidence ebbs away. There are no pamphlets readily available anywhere to direct you to government-funded resources, and the system itself, and the support system itself, is so convoluted to make it difficult to navigate. When I was eventually put in touch with the appropriate agencies, it was usually only to discover the financial qualification thresholds were so low that we didn't qualify for any extended benefits whatsoever. So how do we fix the system and offer support to caregivers? Government needs to spend their money wisely in order to stop penalizing families giving care in their own homes. This can come in the form of more tax breaks, better access to government resources. We almost lost our family home, even after going through all our RSP savings just to survive. We eventually had to rely on the generosity of family and friends. That should not have to happen, especially after all the years we had put into the system. Caregivers and their families need ongoing psychological support. This is self-explanatory. Job training programs for the caregiver, once their services are no longer needed, are essential. Having been out of the workforce for so many years, my skill sets were outdated, and it would have been invaluable to have access to retraining programs. Programs need to be instituted for the ongoing care of the chronic care patient. Despite Janice's seemingly good recovery, her bad days are extreme, psychologically as well as physically. Chronic neuropathic pain is a family illness, and the caregiving never really ends. She can spend days on end in bed when a pain cycle hits, and there is very little anyone can do to help except offer comfort. Janice and I will be celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary next year. And with that, we're asking the government to set up a comprehensive pain strategy in the province of Ontario that not only includes the patients, but includes the caregivers too. They are part of the whole picture, and they need to be included in the strategy. Thank you.